derails and ultimatums rocking the Republican power structure in Austin. Will the ongoing battle over billions in property tax relief do lasting damage to the Texas GOP? On the national stage, the 45th president hauled into a Florida courthouse to face a slew of felony charges. Will this prosecution of Donald Trump derail or energize his bid for another term leading the nation? And here at home, controversial Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo fully backing Sheila Jackson Lee. Will it help or hurt the Congresswoman's quest to be Houston's next mayor? I'm Greg Grugan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Charles Blaine, founder of Urban Reform. Next up, Holly Hansen, political writer for The Texan. In the 3 spot, Dr. Sergio Lina, president of LULAC Houston. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tamaro Bell. And closing us out, well-known businessman and columnist for Real Clear Politics, Bill King. Let's begin.
This is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or a communist nation, threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers.
Former President Donald Trump lashing out with a falsehood after his federal arraignment on 37 criminal counts. It is completely undeniable that scores of classified documents seized at his Mar-a-Lago mansion were not his personal property, and he knew it. While it may not bother many of you that the former president defied the law, the fact is he did and is completely unrepentant. What remains to be seen is whether there will be any game-changing legal or political consequences for the Republican frontrunner. Panel, 2 national polls released after Mr. Trump's indictment have him still leading over his closest Republican rival by 30 points. Charles Blaine, what do you make of that? You know these folks.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting because we've, for the better part of 8 years, heard the president, heard President Trump say that the federal government was coming after him, that, you know, bureaucrats wanted to prosecute him. But then why then hand them ammunition to do this? Whether or not you think what he did is legal or illegal, he definitely handed them ammunition to continue to come after him. And so I just don't understand why you would put yourself in that position. But I do think you make a great point about the polls, because when you do look at how this is going, people, a lot of Republican voters do feel he is being persecuted, and they're kind of, you know, ramping up their support for him, and it puts the challengers in an interesting position of either having to oppose him for this or kind of just jump in line and continue to attack the federal government, and neither of those are really a great place to be, and I doubt either any of the candidates want to be talking about this right now.
Bill King, you've taken a deep dive into the American political psyche, and you know independent voters pretty well. How is this playing with them?
Yeah, so I think that there's an erosion of support in the middle for Trump. There were a lot of people that voted for him just because they were so turned off by the Democratic agenda. But, you know, this is getting to a point where it's just, you know, a lot of us in the middle are just tired of it. We're just tired of listening to it. And it's all about him. It's not about the country. He's not laying out any vision for how he's going to solve problems in the next 4 years. All he's talking about is his personal grievances. And I just think a lot of people are tired of it.
Sergio Lina, if I'm a Democratic strategist, I'm loving this. You know, so you kind of ding up the former president, and then he wins anyway, and then you run an incumbent in Joe Biden. Any merit to that?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised by the polls. What's interesting is that folks need to understand that crime and voting do not go hand in hand all the time. As we know, many elected officials who have been indicted have been fined heavily and have gone to jail, get reelected. You know, they want to start with Kim Paxton. They want to start with Ron Reynolds. They want to start with Eric Dick. But do you ever remember the Washington mayor, Marion Barry, who was caught riding a white pony, went to jail, came out, and was elected as a city councilman? So voting and crime do not always go hand in hand.
Holly, I love it that you have regular dialogue with folks on both sides of this issue, folks who are moving away from the president and looking at other candidates, and those who are digging their heels in. What are your thoughts here?
Well, yes, I have to agree with what Bill said. You know, there's that independent middle, and that's where you're really going to see the election take place, right? So there's some conservatives digging their heels in and seeing this as a political prosecution, which, you know, I mean, you have to look at the fact that Hillary Clinton, you know, did a lot of things with secret documents. You know, we're looking at the legal specifics of the indictment and how they're using the Espionage Act instead of the Presidential Records Act because of the precedent that came from the Clinton administration. Politically speaking, yes, you know, it's a problem for all of the Republican challengers in the primary because instead of talking about what's the best policy for the country, we're talking about Trump and the indictment again.
And that's the way he likes it, right? Tamara Bell?
I'm listening to Holly. I'm listening. This is so funny. When you're a kid, you get caught doing something. What you do? Tell your mama, he did it yesterday. That does not make it right, okay? If you think Hillary committed a crime, then okay, then you know Trump has committed a crime. In addition to that, Hillary didn't say she committed one. He said, I should have declassified, but I didn't. So he knew what he was doing, and that is on tape. The fact that we are at this point, all of these opponents who say they're the anti-Trump, they have been silent. They are so scared. I'm like, when are y'all gonna quit riding this man? I mean it, let it go. But as a Democrat, bring it on. Because that's the one you want to fight, because he's going to lose. He will lose.
Shoreham brings up a great point, and we're going to talk about it in the B block, but, you know, when do you take the safety off the handgun if you're opposing Trump and open fire?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're all running against him because they think that they can win and they can be a better presidential candidate and president than he is and than he was and can be again. And so I think you're going to start to see that more. We've seen Asa Hutchinson, Governor Christie, I think Nikki Haley kind of put her toe in the water with criticizing him. So I think we're starting to see it break a little more. And as time goes on, they're going to have to start doing something to distance themselves from him. And so I think we're going to start to see more candidates start to do it.
Bill, you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I was going to say I don't agree with what Tamara said. I mean, if you watch Chris Christie, he spent an hour just blasting Trump. I mean, just nonstop. So I think that you are going to see this sort of as they start to get some more courage in this, and it's starting to work. I think you're going to see sort of a gang attack on him.
Yeah, Holly, you think that if we get an indictment out of Georgia, that the preponderance, the growing pile of charges, has an impact with the Republican electorate?
I would think so, and I think you have a stronger case coming out of the Fulton County possible indictment that's coming there than you do in this particular indictment, just looking at it legally, because it is such a steep hill to climb to convict on this Espionage Act, because there are very specific requirements for conviction in that case. You have to have national defense information, not just a classified document.
Hold that thought. Still to come, the raging Republican versus Republican dispute over billions in property tax relief. Could the battle cause a rift in our state's majority party? And in our Sunday survey, we're asking viewers if they agree or disagree with the new ban on trans women playing college sports in Texas. Tell us what you think. Vote on our webpage, fox26houston.com, or click on the poll at the top of the page, or tell 26 using our news app. But up next, starting to speak up one by one, Donald Trump's Republican opponents launching shots at the frontrunner over his growing criminal caseload.
If this indictment is true, if what it says is actually the case, President Trump was incredibly reckless with our national security.
President Trump also demanded that I choose between him and the Constitution. I chose the Constitution, and I always will.
Those trailing the former president for the Republican nomination are beginning to open fire on Mr. Trump. While it's not exactly a barrage of condemnation, it's becoming increasingly clear that avoiding the subject or giving the former president a pass amounts to a recipe for a rout. And so we are hearing Frontal attacks from former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who says America doesn't need a commander-in-chief who disregards our secrets, and former New Jersey Mayor Chris Christie, who says Republicans have only lost ground and elections since Trump won in 2016. Panel, do you expect the bombardment to intensify? Sergio.
Absolutely. You know, this is Trump 101. When he was running for the first time for a presidential candidate, he attacked viciously, bombarded seasoned politicians. You're talking about the Ohio governor, Ted Bush from Florida. He attacked them viciously with bombardment. And sometimes politicians or candidates do that in order to pick up some steam. So I see these candidates are going to go straight after Trump to get that, pick up some steam and get some votes in the early primaries.
Okay, in an alternative universe where Tamara Bell is actually a Republican, an advising Republican, you'd be going at him full speed, wouldn't you?
I would that day. When he walked into that courtroom, I'd have been standing right there. See, I told y'all this fool. I told y'all I want to watch this fool. That's what has bothered me, because I'm like, all of y'all supposed to be the alternative to him, but y'all find this out this day, and y'all sit there silent. They had to go wake Chris Christie up on his way somewhere, who knows where. I will keep that comment to myself, but they had to go wake him up to get him in there to be the one to get this started. It's a problem when you want to say you're the anti-him, but I ain't gonna say nothing against him.
All right, Bill King, the Bill King hotline. Hey, Bill, it's Nikki Haley. How do I go out at this guy?
Yeah, so I watched the whole hour of Christie on CNN. I thought it was really he was incredibly effective. Now, I don't think he's got a chance to get the nomination, but he was incredibly effective at attacking Trump. He basically ignored all this criminal stuff and went after him on a bunch of other things. The best line of the whole hour was he started calling him a loser. You know, he lost in 2018, he lost in 2020, he lost in 2020. Loser, 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 which of course not only gets under Trump's skin, but it also just, you know, it begins to this sort of name calling. The other thing that, you know, a lot of conservatives have pointed out, look, Trump is not even vaguely a conservative. I mean, none of the things that conservatives stand for does he espouse. And by the way, on the border, you can say whatever you want to. He didn't put anything in place. Not a single piece of legislation was passed that fundamentally changed the situation. As soon as he was out of office, we went right back to where we were. Now, somebody who was really concerned about the border would have passed a bunch of legislation that couldn't be undone by the next administration, which is a point, by the way, Christie made very articulately during that hour.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Up next, the Congresswoman and the county judge, Sheila Jackson Lee, embraces the support of Lina Hidalgo in the race to be Houston's next mayor.
We know in Texas, Harris County is under attack. They've come after our voting rights. They've come after our flood funding. They've come after our ability to raise revenue, our largest school district. We need that fighter, and Sheila Jackson Lee has never been one to shy away from a fight.
Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo announcing her enthusiastic support for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's bid to be Houston's next mayor. Jackson Lee welcomed the endorsement and touted a long list of accomplishments, including one that raised a few eyebrows.
I have written letters to the Federal Reserve to not raise interest rates so that consumers would be able to get out, both in terms of purchase and large products like homes. You just noticed they didn't raise the interest rates. It might have taken me a little while.
Purported influence with the Fed's Board of Governors aside, Jackson Lee spoke mostly about unifying the community. Serious question, will locking arms with lightning rod Lina help her or hurt her? I ask you, Charles Blaine.
Well, you know, I think it's going to help. I mean, I don't think anyone who was supporting Sheila prior to Lina's endorsement is not supporting her now that Lina is endorsed. But I do think that with an endorsement, you bring all of their enemies and half their friends. I mean, that's how the saying goes. So I think she needs to also understand that, you know, Lina, like you said, is a little bit of a lightning rod, doesn't necessarily have a ton of friends right now, and it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. And then you own everything that she does for the next year. And we've seen her behavior be a little hostile towards members of her own party lately. So I think Sheila should just be a little cautious about how much she embraces Judge Hidalgo.
Tamara Bell, very publicly an ally of Sheila Jackson Lee, a longtime friend.
Absolutely.
Very publicly not a big fan of Lina Hidalgo.
Absolutely. Okay.
So how do
you know, you cannot pick people's friends or whatever. I don't think this hurts Sheila at all. Okay, because how I feel about Lina and how I feel about Sheila ain't got nothing to do with each other. So I don't think this hurts at all. But I do think Lina doing this to try to get some cred on her side, because she the one that's in the low pile. And I've even heard, don't know if it's true, that she's relocating just in case. I don't know if this is true or not. This is the rumor on the street. Don't say I ain't tell y'all that. Okay, that she's relocating potentially into the 18th Congressional District. Now, I don't know if she found a place she like or what, but stay tuned.
All right, said Lina.
Yes.
Lina's been having problems with the Latino community, or at least part of it, right?
Yes, no, I think this is going to help Sheila, because Houston is a heavy Democratic city. And Lina has a lot of support from Latinas and also progressive females. So that's going to help Sheila. But at the same time, it's going to help her, if she decides to run in the future, to get some of that support from that very powerful African-American voting bloc. So it's going to help both of them in the long run.
Holly, I know you're keeping an eye on this. Thoughts?
I have to agree with what Tamara said, is that this actually probably helps Lina Hidalgo more than it helps Sheila Jackson Lee. In regards to Sheila's comment about the Federal Reserve, most people don't know how that works. They're like, fine, yeah, she probably did help fix the economy in this letter writing scheme or what have you. But the reality is her followers are very devoted to her. However, there is an issue with Lina Hidalgo and this divisiveness within the Democrats in the Houston-Harris County area. You've got the conflict between Lina Hidalgo and the district attorney. You've got some conflicting narratives about how to manage crime in the community. And, as Tamara said, that's a concern in a lot of neighborhoods. So if you start, pulling in Lina Hidalgo's views on how to manage criminal justice and combine that with the mayoral's race, you could have a problem there.
And a teaser, there's a little conflict with a guy named Noriega as well. That's the next block. Hey, Bill King, is it going to matter when it all gets down to it?
No. No, endorsements don't matter much at all. I think, a couple things here. One is the fact that she made this comment about the Fed is why she's getting zero traction with the business community in Houston. I mean, the business community is just like hair on fire about her becoming mayor because of comments like that. I will say this about the Latino community. I was at Whitmire's kickoff, and there were some very important Latino elected officials there and some activists in the community, like our colleague Sergio here. I would much rather have the endorsement of Carol Alvarado and Sylvia Garcia standing on the stage with me than I would Lina Hidalgo. Lina Hidalgo is probably more important with white Democrats than she is the Latino community, because she's not from that community. She grew up in Katy. She didn't grow up in the East End or any of these barrio communities. So I think I would much rather have Sylvia and Carol than I would Lina if I were running for mayor.
Charles Blaine, does Sheila Jackson Lee have any problems raising the kind of war chest she's going to need, do you think?
I mean, we'll see. Time will tell. She hasn't had a challenger in a long time, but she's also nationally known. I mean, she's got a big name and people know her. So I think time's going to tell. But I think Lina has shown that she can small dollar fundraise nationwide, and so that could be an area in which her support does help.
All right, we're going to leave it there. When we come back, counterattack. Harris County's fired IT director demanding a very public apology. Will Judge Lina Hidalgo deliver rather than face what could be a very costly lawsuit? Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, it seems controversy follows Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, kind of like that ever-present cloud surrounding the Peanuts character Pigpen. This past week was no different when Hidalgo was the recipient of a demand letter penned by heavy-hitting Houston attorney Rusty Hardin on behalf of former county IT director Rick Noriega. Noriega, you might remember, was terminated reportedly because he declined to undergo sexual harassment training following a complaint lodged against him. In the letter, Mr. Hardin is demanding that Hidalgo retract false and defamatory statements about his client and issue a public apology. The correspondence brought to light by our own Holly Hansen claims that Noriega actually underwent training and characterized the complaint lodged against him as illegitimate payback by the spouse of an employee Noriega had recently disciplined. Panel, I'm doubtful an apology from Hidalgo is forthcoming, which likely means litigation at taxpayer expense. Holly, what's going on here?
Well, Rusty Hardin sent this letter, a demand letter, to Lina Hidalgo and her legal counsel. And what he's asking for is a public apology and a retraction of Lina Hidalgo's comments that were made at Commissioner's Court. Interestingly enough, Lina Hidalgo went into this kind of strange monologue after they came back from executive session. She made a lot of interesting comments, including claiming that she had been groped in that very room, something that has not been addressed, and no one seems to want to answer any questions about. But this got associated with Noriega, so you know there's a lot of questions about what she said there. But the other things that are in this letter from Hardin to Hidalgo are the allegations that he actually did undergo some kind of training in March, was attempting to do another training right before this meeting where they had this vote. So, you know, he's saying he's being defamed and improperly targeted. What's interesting is there does seem to be some kind of dynamic with the employee who made the allegation. Her husband also works for the county, may have had some conflict with Noriega prior to this incident happening. So there's questions about whether or not this was sort of a power dynamic or a true sexual harassment. But I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks if Lina does not make this public retraction and apology by the next Commissioner's Court meeting.
Sergio, rumor has it that there's some folks on the east side who do not like the way Noriega was treated and are not happy with Lina.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this type of incident, these types of incidents, only everybody loses. The community loses, taxpayers lose, reputations are smeared, they're out in the public, all this dirty laundry. But when the issue of sexual harassment needs to be taken care of immediately, internally and swiftly. These allegations that were brought up a while back, all of this surfaced late in the game, it just hurts everyone. But you know who really pockets out of all these lawsuits? Who's going to come out smiling? The lawyers. In the end, the lawyers are the ones that are going to be pocketing and smiling themselves to the bank while everyone else is hurt.
Exactly.
Nothing wrong with that.
Well, what do you think of this tomorrow, Val?
Okay, now going back to what Holly said, when this came out, because this event, for you all who don't know, happened in December.
Right.
Okay, this happened in December. Now, supposedly Noriega turned around and then filed charges that it was false, and then the county attorney wrote a letter saying your allegations that this was false were proved to be false. So supposedly, don't know, but supposedly it's supposed to be a video. There's supposed to be a video out there, and so because that video existed, this is how he ended up getting terminated, you know. But going back to what Holly said about the mantra she went on after this all happened. Oh, I don't put up with this. Oh, I got groped in this room right here. Girl, if that chair didn't grope you getting up, ain't nobody else groped you.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. When we come back, plenty of chaos at the state capitol as rival Republican leaders refuse to compromise over billions in property tax relief.
Bottom line, if the homeowners don't get their $100,000 exemption and their $1,200 to $1,400 tax cut every year for the rest of their lives, there will be no property tax cut for businesses. I'm sick of this.
That was Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick here in Houston on Tuesday, and he was far from done.
I don't like to be in a fight with the House or the governor, but we're not going to take money out of the pockets of the average Texan and give it to the wealthiest Texans and give it to big business. We're not going to do that.
That was Patrick on Thursday in Dallas. He's talking about the $17.6 billion worth of property tax relief approved by the legislature. The Patrick-led Texas Senate wants to expand the homestead exemption permanently from $40,000 to $100,000, a measure Governor Greg Abbott and House Speaker Dade Phelan oppose, preferring to give businesses and commercial landowners a bigger piece of the tax relief pie. In what amounts to an ugly Republican versus Republican standoff, Abbott has been talking with his pen, vetoing dozens of Senate bills and threatening to kill dozens more if a deal isn't done by midnight tonight. Panel, I guess Republicans just can't stand prosperity, huh, Bill?
I think it's clear Abbott's not running for president. Yeah, you mean it's true. Patrick almost sounds like a Democrat in that clip, in that last clip that you had up there. Look, I think that Patrick is looking at the polling. Property taxes is way up on people's radar screen, especially Republican primary voters. And so I think he's got the better political argument here. You know, this is sort of weird to me because this is the kind of dispute that ought to be solved by, you know, adding up the pot, splitting it down the middle and saying, okay, we're all going to go home. And instead they're engaging in this internal warfare, which indicates to me this is really personal.
All right, Charles Bland, you talk to a lot of Republicans who are kind of in the thick of this and trying not to get become collateral damage. Yeah. What are you hearing?
Well, you know, first, it was interesting. You know, Lieutenant Governor said that they don't want to take money out of the pockets of average Texans and give it to big businesses. But yet, this legislative session, they re-upped a version of the tax abatement program for businesses to take money out of the pockets of Texans to give to businesses. So, you know, but I do think that, here's the thing, what we're still not talking about are the renters that are involved in this entire process. I mean, if they actually want to provide property tax relief to all Texans, they would look at it as a way to give property tax relief to every head of household. 52%, I think it's roughly 52% of Texans rent. They're not getting anything with the homestead exemption. They're not getting anything at all. Even if you are a homeowner who uses that home to rent out to people, you are not getting anything for a home with a homestead exemption. So you're not providing relief to all Texans who deserve it, and all Texans who benefit from whatever the legislature does. And so I would hope that they would look at a way of including them in there, but that has not been something that's included in the conversation.
My number is 40% of Texans.
Okay, I'm probably a little.
Anyway, Lina, I mean, look, there are a lot of people who are not going to get much relief here. And they contributed to the sales tax driven surplus. And so when Patrick talks about 5.7 million homeowners getting, there are still some people left on the side of the road. Should this have gone back in the form of a sales tax reduction?
Well, not so much a sales tax reduction. By the way, I do like all this Republican infighting. I love it. It's quite unique. But, you know, I think overall, I mean, just be fair. The game of being fair. If you have the surplus, why don't you just divide, you know, 1/3 homeowners, 1/3 business, and 1/3 for the commercial landowners? Just be fair. Give everybody tax relief. I think that's the best solution.
Well, the Senate plan does have 70% of the Senate plan is compression. And so this is just a bigger piece of the pie for businesses and landowners. Holly, Brad Johnson, your colleagues, done some good reporting on this. Your thoughts here?
Well, if you look at the history of this is a political fight, and Republicans have been infighting for a long time. Trust me, this is just a little more public than it has been in the past. But, you know, what you had in the regular session is you had the House plan that included an appraisal cap reform, and on the Senate side, you had the homestead exemption. Both were looking at, you know, putting money into compression. So the governor's thought in calling this special session is, okay, we're going to compromise. We're going to do only compression. The House is going to drop their pet project. The Senate's going to drop their pet project. So the House comes in, does what the governor asks. The Senate says, no, we're going to fight for our homestead exemption. Now, whether or not you're arguing about what's the most appropriate tax relief, now you've set up Patrick basically starting this, saying to Governor Abbott, I'm in charge here. And, you know, you got to look at what Governor Abbott's doing. He's wielding his constitutional power as the governor of the state to, you know, wield some control over the legislature.
Hey, full disclosure, a permanent $60,000 homestead exemption increase helps me big time. I'm assuming that once it's laid out to folks in the neighborhoods, they agree. Tomorrow we'll get about 30 seconds. Okay.
They would support that 100%. I mean, and it's funny, you said that, you know, Abbott's doing his government constitutional right and Patrick's doing this. I wonder if that's why Patrick lent home he $125,000. I'm just saying that, you know, because he lent the Attorney General $175,000.
10 seconds.
It's politics. Homeowners are the people that vote in election. That's what it's all about.
All right, we're going to leave it there. When we come back, trans women banned from competing in Texas collegiate sports. Has fear or fairness prevailed? But up next, it's smoking hot in the great state of Texas. Will the grid, will I have enough juice to get us through the punishing heat ahead? Seemingly relentless near-record heat and multiple days of record-busting demand. That's a troubling combination here in the Lone Star State for a power grid struggling to meet a constantly growing need for additional electrons. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas has projected an adequate, although seemingly thin, reserve of around 5,000 megawatts. Of course, there's kind of an asterisk there because about 30% of our power comes from variable wind and solar. Now, former Public Utility Chairman Peter Lake recently said Texans will be relying on the breath of God to keep cool this summer. Panel, is anybody worried? Holly?
A little bit. I do think that we're going to get through this summer, but it is going to be a stretch at some points during the day. You know, we have added a lot of solar power, which performs well when the sun is shining, but as soon as the sun goes down, you've stopped generating that solar power, you can't store it, and you still have a high demand as people are coming home, they're making meals, or, you know, enjoying entertainment, television, or, you know, computer entertainment and this kind of thing. So you still have that heavy demand. We've increased demand in the state. We have not really increased any dispatchable power by much at all. We do have some new incentives coming, but yeah, it's getting pretty tight.
Those incentives that Holly talked about, Bill King, a plan to give 3% loans, a 10% bonus, and there was something else. Oh, a 10-year tax abatement to those who build new gas-fired generation. Is that going to be enough?
Well, I don't know. Look, we need more dispatchable power, but I think it's important to remember that summer stress on the grid is much different from the Uri storm. The Uri storm really called a collapse of capacity, and much of it was. That's not so much what happens in the summertime. What happens in the summertime, we just need more than we can produce. And so you can do rolling blackouts or brownouts a little bit easier to manage a summer surge than you can this collapse of supply that we had in the winter storm. So I could see some blackouts along the way. But look, all the other stuff we talk about, the only thing that matters on the grid is air conditioning. It is the hog, nothing else. And we've gone to so many LED lights and everything. The air conditioning is the one that really puts the stress. So watch the temperatures, especially late in the day.
Oh, I want to blame Charles Blaine's generation. Because, you know, we're talking about electric cars, new drag on the grid, as well as crypto. All your crazy folks doing crypto, they're sucking, not to mention 1,000 new people coming to Texas every single day. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too concerned. You know, we look at Uri, it was 2 years ago. We've had 2 summers and 2 winters since then. We haven't had too many issues. ERCOT did say, though, that next week with the heat wave that's coming, that they're probably going to reach their record. I think Tuesday is going to be like 81,000 megawatt hours, and then Wednesday's 82, and so they're going to reach their all-time record. But if the power does go out, people should take those solar lawn lights they have outside and bring them inside at night, and they'll have light.
Go ahead, Tamara.
Listen, y'all talking about it, we shouldn't worry about this. My air was out for 27 days with that little, when we hit those 3 days of rain in our area. It was over 50,000 people without power. Now, Bill said, well, we may have to do the rolling blackouts. Well, if we're going to do the rolling blackouts, I hope they wait till it's black out and don't do it right in the middle of the day like they did in L.A. and people was going crazy and robbing people. So I hope if y'all do a blackout, wait till it's black out.
All right, we're going to leave it right
Black
there.
Friday.
Exactly.
When we come back, the governor calls it protecting the integrity of women's sports. Critics call it bigotry. On our table for discussion, the new law banning trans females from college athletics.
Women in Texas can be assured that the integrity of their sports will be protected in Texas.
Governor Greg Abbott signing into law a ban on trans women competing against biological females in Texas collegiate athletics. Critics of the measure call it exclusionary, bigoted, and hurtful, while advocates say it will preserve fundamental fairness for athletes born female who just shouldn't be forced to face competitors who experience puberty as males before transitioning. Panel, what's your point? Holly, you've looked at this issue.
Absolutely. You know, women fought for decades to have their place in sports. So we got all these great women's competitive sports set up. But now when you have these people who did not go through puberty as a male, you know, they have a natural biological advantage. It's just common sense. It's science. There was a women's cycling event recently where the trans woman beat the second place competitor by something like 6 minutes. That's a huge difference in ability and strength and speed and so forth. So it just makes sense. You know, we're not an octopus, right? We have biological differences between male and female, and you just scientifically you can't dispute that. So I think this is an appropriate piece of legislation.
Tomorrow, our viewers on our unscientific poll seem to agree with that. 99% say they favor this this distinction.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Because I 100% agree with what Ali just said. Someone who ran track before in the 9th grade, I couldn't beat the worst guy on the guy team. This is about fairness and competition. And if you went to puberty as a male, you're going to beat all the, you just are. So I think this is about fairness. This has nothing to do with bigotry or any of that. This is about fairness and where you compete. And you want to compete with equals, and this is how they feel they're doing this.
Cynthia, this is one of those issues that if you're a middle-of-the-road Democrat and you don't sign up with the pro-trans community on this, they're going to try to out you and criticize you publicly. You know, what do you think of that?
No, absolutely. You'd be definitely ostracized. But the issue here is an issue of fairness. I agree with Tamara. The issue is that the laws already exist with NCAA in terms of treating each case on a case-by-case basis. This is very political, and let's keep in mind, any type of discrimination is discrimination. We should frown upon it, but also the issue of fairness in any competitive sports. We have drug testing in the Olympics. We have all sorts in professional boxing. We have all sorts of trying to make sure that the field is competitive and fair, but the transgender community is extremely small in competitive sports. But the real issue is, why are they passing these laws, and why isn't it the governor attacking issues like sensible gun laws, giving public school teachers a pay raise, and also more better health care for the elderly? Those are the real issues that should be focused, not on a very small, super small minority group in competitive sports.
All right, Bill King wanted to talk about the Dodger nuns, but I'm going to make him talk about this.
So first of all, you said that they were banned from college sports. That's not correct.
Right, correct.
They can go compete in the male division if they want to. So, now look, this is just seems like sort of a common sense thing to me. And by the way, within the LGBTQ plus, whatever, how many letters are these days, you know, there is not a unanimous opinion about this. A lot of my gay friends agree that they should not be allowed to compete. So, you know, I think this is one of those situations where a small group of people are actually, you know, hurting their cause by pushing this.
15-second quick take.
I mean, yeah, I think Bill makes a great point. And you even look at the Powerlifters Association. They came out and said something about this a while back because there was a trans power lifter who beat the female power lifter, and it's like if you've gone through puberty, you have a different body structure, different things have happened, and in a sport like that, it's really hard to compete, you know, on a level playing field if that's the case.
We have your favorite topic coming up. All right. Up next, will sharing driveways and courtyards make our city safer and more livable? We'll discuss the Houston planning proposals that have lots of folks riled up against change. Welcome back. There's an old saying that goes, good fences make for good neighbors. So what about shared driveways? It's a serious question at the heart of an ongoing debate at City Hall, where planners are proposing shared driveways to diminish sidewalk breaks and add street parking for future developments. Problem is, builders say prospective customers simply don't want shared driveways. There are other proposed changes to Chapter 42 of the city's ordinance code, including allowing more shared courtyard developments to maximize space and affordability. Panel, what should we make of this? Charles Blaine washing it like a hawk.
Well, I mean, some of the footage that you just showed really highlights how bad this could be. You know, the planning director says she wants to reclaim this land for the public domain. But what you're doing is with the shared driveway proposals, you're pushing so many vehicles onto the street on both sides of them. We've heard from emergency service workers who say that their vehicles would have a hard time getting in and out. Garbage trucks would have a hard time. If you're an elderly person, or if you're any person pulling out of your driveway with cars on both sides, and it's really hard to see. You might hit a cyclist, you might hit another vehicle, you might hit a kid that's running across the road. I mean, it's a really dangerous proposal, and a lot of folks showed up to testify against it, and for some reason they're so adamant on this one piece of it. And so I hope when City Council considers it, they do remove that piece of it, because a lot of the other, I know Tamara has an issue with some of the other proposals, but a lot of the other ones aren't too bad. But the public hearing's on June 21st.
So not an urban reform we need. All right, Tamara Bell.
I believe this whole thing is a three-card Molly because everybody is focused on the shared driveways, and the reason they're doing the shared driveways is because they want to reclaim the public right-of-way for all public. Because when developers do their development, they take part of the sidewalk and make it their driveway. So when you strolling down the street with your baby in a buggy, you got to go in the street and hope you don't get hit by the cyclist or the vehicle that's now on your street, since they putting bike lanes everywhere you look. But the courtyards, as they call them, which I call Jim Jones compounds, that's the ones y'all need to be watching, because that densification does not work. There will be no minimum size for a home on a 5,000 square foot lot. Basically, they telling you you can put up to 7 or 8 homes. We don't have the infrastructure. They never check the infrastructure, and you don't know what's under there. So you all really need to be watching what they're doing, because these is how you got the tenements that came up in New York. The only difference is they not tall. And I'm gonna tell you, this is how the gentrification of East End, Third Ward, and all that started in the Heights. Because when they build these multiple compounds on one site, then your house becomes a detention pond, because they put cement all over theirs, so the water's gonna fall to the left or fall to the right. It ain't gonna fall where they are. So y'all need to pay attention to this.
All right, 30 seconds. Sergio, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, we live in the U.S. This is not utopia. Sharing driveways is not going to work, because, look what happened in Pennsylvania. Unless all these people go to the same church and practice love thy neighbor, but we, obviously in America, we do not. Pennsylvania, 3 folks got shot because they were shoveling the snow from one driveway to the other. A white woman shot a black woman in Florida because the trash can was in her driveway. So we got to keep this in mind. This is not going to work unless everybody goes to church and follow love thy neighbor.
Bill King has studied every major subject in this city. Thoughts? You got 20 seconds.
So the problem here is we have a bunch of planners that think that Houston is on this tremendous population boom in the future. That's not the case. Houston's population has been stagnant for the last 5 years. If you go to the Texas Demographic Center, Harris County is barely going to grow over the next 4 decades. We might add 20% to this Harris County population over the next 4 decades. And by the way, none of that's going to be inside the city of Houston. This is all a bunch of nonsense.
Okay, you heard it from Bill King. Still ahead, sticking with Trump, hell or high water, despite the slew of criminal charges and a field of less controversial options. Many Republicans are staying loyal to 45. On tonight's edition of Texas, the issue is right here on Fox 26. We are talking to Congressman Randy Weber, who, like most of our state's Republican delegation, is hanging tough with Trump despite the mounting criminal charges faced by the former president.
A lot of people say, you know what? I like the fact that Trump fights back. And so I think the world understands that, and they can't get one over on Donald J. Trump. I don't see anybody in the field that has that kind of chutzpah.
Tamara Bell. Hey, big weekend for all Americans. Juneteenth.
Absolutely. I attended an event yesterday, a conference, and Senator Warnock from Georgia was the guest speaker. I have been very blessed in that I used to be the community liaison for State Representative Al Edwards, who made Juneteenth a state holiday. My line sister is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who made it a federal holiday. When you read and you hear, and like I said, it should be embraced by all communities, but the African Americans in Texas, 2 years, they had to wait 2 years till they got that news. So I'm telling you, all have a wonderful Juneteenth weekend, and happy Father's Day to all the fathers on the panel and all the fathers who are fathers. Thank you.
All right, happy Juneteenth to everybody, particularly you.
Yes. Well, as we were talking about off camera, it was something that I wasn't aware of until I moved to Texas nearly 10 years ago, and so it's been really interesting to learn about it as I've been here, and now that it's a national holiday, all my friends in New Jersey know about it too. And happy Father's Day to my dad.
All right, Bill, thoughts? Got about 15 seconds, 20 seconds?
Yeah, just a little Texas history lesson here. I saw a commentator on CNN said this was when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation. This was when the Emancipation Proclamation was read in Galveston, Texas, and people in Texas found out about it.
Got to leave it there. Thanks to this week's panel, and thank you for joining us. The conversation continues on a national level next on Fox News Sunday with Shannon Bream. And we'll keep talking here with What's Your Point Overtime, streaming live on fox26houston.com and on our Facebook page. From all of us here, have a safe Father's Day and Juneteenth.